The summer heat in Austin, Texas was unbearable that July afternoon as I packed my overnight bag for the annual Henderson family reunion. My hands trembled slightly as I folded my favorite blue dress, the one Mom had complimented me on before she passed away 3 years ago. I'd been looking forward to this gathering for months, hoping it would be different this time. My name is Sarah Henderson, and I'm 32 years old. I work as a librarian at the Austin Public Library, a job that barely pays enough to cover my modest apartment rent and student loans. While my siblings have climbed corporate ladders and built impressive careers, I've always been the one who stayed close to home, taking care of our aging parents when they needed it most. As I drove my 10-year-old Honda Civic down Interstate 35 toward the family lake house in Marble Falls, memories flooded back. I remembered countless weekends spent helping Dad with his diabetes management after his diagnosis, driving him to doctor's appointments when my successful lawyer brother Mark was too busy with his cases. I recalled staying up nights with Mom during her cancer treatments, holding her hand while my sister Jessica, now a marketing executive in Dallas, sent flowers and called occasionally. The lake house came into view, its wooden deck overlooking the crystal clear water. Cars were already parked in the circular driveway. Mark's BMW, Jessica's brand new Mercedes, and my cousin David's Tesla. My Honda looked pathetic among them, but I pushed the thought away. This was family. This was supposed to be about love, not material success. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the house, hearing laughter and conversation drifting from the back patio. The smell of barbecue filled the air, mixing with the scent of blooming wildflowers that Mom had planted years ago. For a moment, I felt hopeful. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe this year, I'd feel like I truly belonged. "Sarah," my Aunt Linda's voice called out as I rounded the corner. She embraced me warmly, her familiar perfume bringing back childhood memories. "You look wonderful, honey. How's the library treating you?" Before I could answer, I heard Dad's booming voice from across the patio. Well, look who finally decided to show up." He was sitting in his favorite lawn chair, a beer in his hand, surrounded by Mark, Jessica, and several cousins. His tone carried that familiar edge I'd learned to recognize over the years. I forced a smile and walked over. "Hi, Dad. Sorry, I'm a little late. Traffic was heavy coming out of Austin." "Traffic," he chuckled, taking a sip of his beer. "Must be nice to have such a flexible schedule. Not everyone can just leave work whenever they want." The comment stung, but I'd grown used to his subtle digs about my career. I settled into an empty chair, trying to join the conversation about Mark's latest court victory and Jessica's recent promotion. The sun was beginning to set over the lake, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. As dinner was served, brisket, corn on the cob, and Mom's famous potato salad recipe that Aunt Linda, now may die, tried to contribute to the conversations. But every time I spoke, I felt like I was speaking into a void. When I mentioned a new literacy program I'd helped develop at the library, Dad waved his hand dismissively. "That's nice, sweetheart, but let's hear about real accomplishments. Jessica, tell everyone about that campaign you landed." I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, feeling invisible. The potato salad suddenly tasted like cardboard. I excused myself and walked to the kitchen, needing a moment to collect myself. Through the window, I could see everyone still gathered around the table, their animated conversations continuing without missing a beat. Mom's favorite coffee mug sat on the counter, the one with "World's Best Mom" printed on it. I touched it gently, wishing she were here. She always made sure I felt heard, valued, important. Without her, these gatherings felt like performances where I never knew my lines. When I returned to the table, the conversation had shifted to vacation plans. Mark was describing his upcoming trip to Europe with his family, while Jessica talked about her weekend getaway to Napa Valley. When someone asked about my summer plans, I mentioned my intention to visit some local state parks for hiking. "Hiking alone?" Dad raised an eyebrow. "Sarah, you're 32. When are you going to find someone and settle down? Your mother and I were worried about you ending up alone." The words hit me like a physical blow. "I'm doing fine, Dad. I'm focused on my career." He laughed, and I noticed others around the table shifting uncomfortably. "Honey, being a librarian isn't exactly a career. It's more like a hobby that pays." I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment. The conversations around us had quieted, and I could sense everyone watching. This was supposed to be a celebration of family, a time to reconnect and support each other. Instead, I felt like I was on trial. "I help hundreds of people every week," I said quietly, trying to keep my voice steady. I run educational programs, help students with research, assist elderly people with technology. I'm sure you do, Dad interrupted, his voice taking on that patronizing tone I'd heard so many times before. But let's be honest, Sarah, you're 32, single, living in a tiny apartment, driving a car that's older than some of the teenagers in this family. You depend on us for everything: Christmas gifts, birthday money, emergency funds. When your car breaks down. The table had gone completely silent now. I could hear the gentle lapping of lake water against the dock, the distant sound of fireworks from someone's 4th of July celebration across the lake. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. Dad, I'm not trying to be cruel, sweetheart, he continued, his voice softer now but somehow even more devastating. I'm just concerned. Your mother and I always worried about you. Mark has his law firm, Jessica has her career and her condo, but you're stuck. You're not moving forward with your life. I stared at my plate, unable to look up. The conversation slowly resumed around me, but I felt like I was underwater, hearing everything through a thick, muffled barrier. Someone refilled my iced tea glass. Someone else asked about dessert. Life continued while I sat there, feeling like I was dissolving into the wooden deck chair. As the evening progressed, I tried to participate, tried to smile and laugh at the right moments, but Dad's words echoed in my mind, mixing with every doubt I'd ever had about my life choices. When someone suggested we all go inside to look at old photo albums, I followed along, hoping to find comfort in happier memories. The living room was exactly as Mom had left it, her reading chair still positioned by the window, her bookmark still holding her place in the last novel she'd been reading. We gathered around the coffee table as Jessica opened the first album, filled with pictures from our childhood. Look at this one. Mark pointed to a photo of us at another family reunion, maybe 15 years ago. Sarah, you were so serious even then, always had your nose in a book. Some things never change, Dad chuckled from his recliner. Sarah was born old, never wanted to take risks, never wanted to leave her comfort zone. I looked at the photo. I was 17, sitting slightly apart from everyone else, reading while the rest of the family played volleyball. In the picture, I looked content, peaceful. But through Dad's eyes, I looked isolated, different, problematic. Remember when Sarah wanted to major in art? Jessica added, flipping through more pages. Thank God you talked her out of that, Dad. At least library science is practical. I remembered that conversation differently. I'd been passionate about art, had dreamed of teaching or maybe working in a museum. But Dad had convinced me that art was impractical, that I needed something stable, something safe. Now, even my safe choice wasn't good enough. The album pages turned, revealing years of family memories, graduations, weddings, holidays, celebrations. In every photo, I noticed the same pattern: me on the periphery, always slightly removed from the center of attention. Had I always been the outsider, or had I just never noticed it before? By 10 o'clock, the younger cousins were getting tired, and people began talking about bedtime arrangements. The plan was for everyone to stay overnight, with sleeping bags and air mattresses distributed throughout the house. I'd been looking forward to this, staying up late talking, sharing stories, feeling like part of the family. Sarah, you can take the couch in the den, Dad directed. Mark and his family get the master bedroom. Jessica gets Mom's old room, and the cousins can spread out in the living room. I nodded, though something about the arrangement felt deliberate, symbolic. The couch in the den was isolated from everyone else, tucked away in the back of the house. It was where overnight guests stayed, not family, but visitors who were tolerated for a brief time before being expected to leave. As I unfolded my sleeping bag in the den, I could hear laughter and conversation continuing in the main part of the house. Through the thin walls, I caught fragments of stories being shared, inside jokes being told, memories being relived. I wasn't part of any of it. I lay in the darkness, staring at the ceiling, replaying the evening's events. Dad's words kept echoing. You're not moving forward with your life. Was he right? Had I been fooling myself about my worth, my contributions, my place in the world? Outside, a nightbird called across the lake, its cry lonely and haunting. I pulled the sleeping bag up to my chin and tried to sleep, but my mind kept racing. Tomorrow would bring more conversations, more opportunities to feel like I didn't belong. But tonight, in the isolation of the den, I began to wonder if maybe it was time to stop trying so hard to fit into a family that seemed determined to keep me on the outside. The last sound I heard before finally drifting off was the distant laughter from the living room, a sound that felt like it was coming from another world, a world where I would always be a visitor, never truly home. I woke before dawn, my back aching from the uncomfortable couch. Through the den window, I could see the lake shrouded in early morning mist, peaceful and still. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the air conditioning and Dad's snoring from the master bedroom. I slipped out of my sleeping bag and padded to the kitchen, hoping to find some coffee. The familiar ritual of making coffee in Mom's old kitchen brought a small comfort. I remembered how she used to wake up early during these reunions, preparing a big breakfast for everyone, humming quietly to herself as she worked. As the coffee brewed, I stepped onto the back patio and watched the sunrise paint the lake in shades of gold and pink. This had always been my favorite time of day, here before everyone else woke up, when the house held nothing but peaceful silence and possibility. "You're up early." I turned to find Mark standing in the doorway, his hair messy from sleep, wearing an old t-shirt and shorts. For a moment, he looked like the big brother I remembered from childhood before success and ambition had created distance between us. "Couldn't sleep," I said, gesturing toward the coffee pot. "Want some?" He nodded and joined me on the patio. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the mist slowly lift from the water. A great blue heron stood motionless at the water's edge, waiting patiently for fish. "Dad was pretty hard on you last night," Mark said finally. I sipped my coffee, choosing my words carefully. "He's worried about me." "I get that, Sarah. Mark set down his mug and looked at me directly. "You know he loves you, right? He just... He doesn't understand your choices. He's from a different generation. To him, success means money, status, traditional milestones. And to you?" I asked. Mark was quiet for a long moment. "Honestly, I used to think the same way, but watching you with Mom during her treatments, seeing how you dropped everything to help Dad with his diabetes management, I realized you'd been carrying a lot of weight that the rest of us didn't want to carry." His words surprised me. I'd never heard him acknowledge what I'd done for our parents. "I didn't mind helping. They needed someone. But we all should have been there," Mark said. "I was so focused on building my practice, on achieving what I thought Dad wanted from me, that I let you handle everything. That wasn't fair." I felt a lump forming in my throat. "I chose to stay close to home. I chose to help. I don't regret that. But you shouldn't have had to choose between having a life and taking care of family," Mark replied. "And last night, Dad was wrong to say those things. You're not a burden, Sarah. You're not stuck. You're the most dependable person in this family." Before I could respond, we heard movement inside the house. The day was beginning, and soon the patio would be filled with voices and activity. Mark squeezed my shoulder gently. "Don't let him get to you, okay? You're doing better than you think." As family members gradually emerged from the house, the kitchen filled with the sounds of breakfast preparation. Jessica took charge of making pancakes while various cousins set the table and prepared fruit salad. I helped where I could, but I felt like I was moving through a fog. Dad appeared around 9, freshly showered and in good spirits. He kissed my forehead as he passed. "Morning, sweetheart. Sleep well?" "Fine," I said, though the couch had left me with a crick in my neck. "Good. Today's going to be fun. We're planning to take the boat out. Maybe do some water skiing. You should join us." I nodded, though I'd never been comfortable on the water. While Mark and Jessica had grown up fearless on jet skis and wakeboard, I'd always preferred reading on the shore, watching them from a safe distance. After breakfast, as everyone prepared for the day on the lake, I retreated to Mom's old bedroom. Jessica was packing her overnight bag, preparing to leave early for a dinner engagement in Dallas. "I wish I could stay longer," she said, folding her clothes neatly. "But this client dinner is important. You understand." I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her pack. "Jess, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Do you think I've wasted my life?" She paused, a silk blouse halfway into her suitcase. "What do you mean?" "Dad's right, isn't he? I'm 32, single, living paycheck to paycheck. I don't have the career success you and Mark have. I don't have the house, the car, the impressive vacation photos." Jessica sat down beside me. "Sarah, you helped Mom through cancer. You've been there for Dad through his health scares. You've contributed to this family in ways that can't be measured in dollars or job titles. But I'm not moving forward," I said, echoing Dad's words. "I'm stuck, says who?" Jessica's voice was sharper now. "You have a job that matters. You help people every day. You have friends, hobbies. A life that makes sense to you. Just because it doesn't look like my life or Mark's life doesn't mean it's wrong. Her words were kind, but I could hear the pity in her voice. She saw me as someone who needed reassurance, someone who couldn't see her own worth without help. Maybe that was true. Maybe I had become so accustomed to being the family's afterthought that I'd internalized it completely. The boat trip was exactly what I'd expected. While everyone else took turns water skiing and wakeboarding, I sat in the boat with a book, applying sunscreen and occasionally taking photos of the others. Dad drove the boat with expert skill, calling out encouragement to the skiers. "Sarah, you should try," he called over the engine noise. "Come on, live a little." I shook my head, pointing to my book. "I'm happy watching." "That's our Sarah," he said to Mark, who was preparing for his turn. Always the observer, never the participant. The comment was casual, throwaway, but it hit me like a slap. Always the observer, never the participant. Was that really how he saw me? How everyone saw me? As we returned to shore in the late afternoon, I felt emotionally drained. The sun had been intense, and despite the sunscreen, I could feel my shoulders burning. My head ached from the boat's engine noise and the constant effort of trying to seem engaged and happy. "Let's fire up the grill again," Dad announced as we tied up the boat. "I'm thinking burgers and hot dogs for dinner." As everyone dispersed to shower and change, I lingered on the dock. The lake was calm now, reflecting the late afternoon sky like a mirror. I thought about all the family gatherings that had taken place here over the years, all the memories that had been made. But increasingly, I felt like I was a witness to other people's lives rather than a participant in my own. My phone buzzed with a text from my friend Emma back in Austin. "How's the family reunion? Hope you're having fun." I stared at the message, trying to figure out how to respond. Was I having fun? Or was I just going through the motions, playing a role that everyone expected me to play? Dinner was a repeat of the night before, lively conversation about careers, travel plans, and family gossip. I contributed when asked direct questions but mostly listened, feeling like I was watching a movie about someone else's family. After dinner, as we sat around the fire pit roasting marshmallows, Dad began telling stories about our childhood. The stories were funny, warm, filled with love and laughter. But I noticed that in most of them, I was either absent or playing a minor role. "Remember when Mark and Jessica built that elaborate fort in the backyard?" Dad chuckled. "They spent hours planning it, gathering materials, organizing their friends to help." Sarah just sat under the tree reading, completely oblivious to all the excitement. Everyone laughed, and I smiled along. But the story felt different from my perspective. I remembered wanting to join in, but Mark and Jessica had made it clear that it was their project, their friends, their game. I'd retreated to my book not from choice, but from rejection. Sarah was always in her own world, Dad continued, content to let everyone else take the lead. Even now, she's happy to let life happen to her, instead of making things happen. The words hung in the air around the fire. I felt every eye on me, waiting for my response, my defense, my explanation. But what could I say? That I'd been taking the lead on caring for our parents while everyone else pursued their dreams. That I'd been making things happen, just not the kinds of things that got celebrated at family gatherings. "I think I'm going to head inside," I said quietly, standing up from my chair. "I'm pretty tired." "So early?" Dad asked. "We were just getting started with the stories." "I have a headache," I said, which was true. "I'll see everyone in the morning." As I walked toward the house, I heard Dad's voice resume, launching into another story about Mark's high school football achievements. The laughter and conversation continued without missing a beat, as if I'd never been there at all. In the den, I sat on the edge of the couch and looked at myself in the mirror above the dresser. I saw a woman who looked tired, defeated, older than her 32 years. My shoulders were sunburned, my hair was limp from the lake humidity, and my eyes held a sadness that I'd been trying to hide for years. I thought about Mark's words from the morning, that I wasn't a burden, that I'd been carrying weight for the family. But his kindness felt like pity, like the consolation prize given to someone who couldn't compete in the real game. As I prepared for bed, I could hear the family still gathered around the fire, their voices carrying through the night air. They were sharing memories, bonding, creating new stories that would be told at future gatherings. And I was alone in the back room, once again relegated to the periphery of my own family's life. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through social media, looking at photos from friends, weekends. Emma had posted pictures from a hiking trip with her boyfriend. My coworker Janet had shared photos of her daughter's birthday party. Everyone seemed to be living full, engaged lives, while I sat in a dark room, feeling sorry for myself. But as I put my phone away and settled into the uncomfortable couch, I realized something had shifted. The sadness was still there, but underneath it was something else, a growing sense of clarity. Maybe it was time to stop waiting for my family to see my worth and start proving it to myself. The voices around the fire gradually quieted as people began heading to bed. I lay in the darkness, listening to the house settle around me, and for the first time in years, I began to imagine what my life might look like if I stopped trying to earn a place in a family that seemed determined to keep me as a supporting character in their story. The next morning, I woke to the sound of suitcases being zipped and cars starting in the driveway. The reunion was ending, and people were beginning their journeys home. I lay still for a moment, listening to the sounds of departure, and felt a strange sense of relief. When I finally emerged from the den, I found Dad in the kitchen, cleaning up the last of the breakfast dishes. Mark had already left for Austin, and Jessica was long gone, back to her important client dinner in Dallas. "Morning, sleepyhead," Dad said cheerfully. "You missed breakfast, but there's coffee left." I poured myself a cup and sat at the kitchen table, watching him work. He moved with the efficiency of someone who'd been taking care of himself since Mom died, though I knew he struggled with the loneliness. "Good reunion this year," he said, wiping down the counters. "Always nice to have everyone together." "Dad," I said, setting down my coffee cup, "we need to talk." He glanced over at me, perhaps hearing something in my tone that made him pause. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" I took a deep breath, gathering courage from somewhere I didn't know I possessed. "What you said last night, about me being stuck, about not moving forward with my life, Sarah." "I know, let me finish." My voice was steadier than I felt. "You said I'm not moving forward, that I'm a burden, that I depend on you for everything. I need you to understand something." Dad set down his dish rag and turned to face me fully. His expression was cautious, like he was finally hearing something in my voice that he'd never heard before. "For the past 5 years, I've been the one who showed up," I continued. "When you were diagnosed with diabetes and needed someone to drive you to appointments, to help you understand your medication, to learn how to check your blood sugar, I was there. When Mom got sick, really sick, I was the one who rearranged my schedule to take her to chemotherapy. I was the one who stayed overnight at the hospital when she had complications. I was the one who researched treatment options and second opinions." Dad's face had gone pale. "Sarah, you know how grateful I am, do I?" I interrupted. "Because last night, in front of the entire family, you made me sound like a failure. Like someone who can't take care of herself, like someone who's stuck because she's too weak or too scared to build a real life." The kitchen was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. Dad stared at me, and I could see him processing my words, perhaps seeing them from my perspective for the first time. "You want to know the truth about those emergency funds you mentioned?" I stood up, pacing to the window that overlooked the lake. "The car repair money, the Christmas gifts, the birthday money. You're right, I've needed help. Do you know why?" I turned back to face him. "Because I used my savings to help pay for Mom's treatments. Because I took unpaid leave from work to be with her during her final weeks. Because I've been supplementing your grocery budget since Mom died. Because I know you're too proud to ask for help but too stubborn to admit you're struggling." Dad's mouth opened, but no words came out. "You think I'm stuck?" I continued, my voice growing stronger. "I chose to stay close to home. I chose to be available when you needed me. I chose to put family first, even when it meant putting my own dreams on hold. And instead of recognizing that sacrifice, you humiliate me in front of everyone. Sarah, you never meant to hurt me." I shook my head. "Dad, you've been hurting me for years. Every comment about my job, my apartment, my car, my single status, it all adds up. You've made me feel like I'm not good enough, like I'm falling behind, like I'm a disappointment." I could see tears forming in his eyes, but I couldn't stop now. The words had been building for too long. "Do you know what I do at work?" I asked. "I run 3 literacy programs. I organize community events. I help elderly people learn to use computers so they can stay connected with their families. I teach children to read. I help high school students with college applications. I matter to people." "Dad, I make a difference." "I know you do," he said quietly. "Do you?" I challenged. "Because yesterday you called my career a hobby. You dismissed everything I've worked for, everything I've accomplished. You made me feel ashamed of work that I love, work that matters." Dad sat down heavily at the table, his head in his hands. "Sarah, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. You didn't realize, because you never asked, I said, my voice softer now, but still firm. You never asked what my programs accomplish. You never asked how I'm doing emotionally. You never asked if I'm happy with my choices. You just assumed I was failing because my life doesn't look like Mark's or Jessica's. I sat back down across from him. I'm not married, but I have meaningful relationships. I'm not wealthy, but I'm financially stable. I don't have a big house, but I have a home I love. I don't travel to Europe, but I explore beautiful places right here in Texas. My life is smaller than my siblings' lives, but it's mine, and it's enough. Dad looked up at me, and I could see the regret in his eyes. You're right, he said. I've been unfair to you. I've been ... I've been a terrible father. You're not a terrible father, I said, feeling some of my anger softened. But you've been holding me to someone else's definition of success instead of recognizing the value of the path I've chosen. Your mother always said you were the strongest of the three of you, Dad said quietly. She said you had the biggest heart, the most courage. She was so proud of you. The mention of Mom brought tears to my eyes. She never made me feel like I wasn't enough. She loved you exactly as you are, Dad said. And I've been so focused on what I thought you should be that I forgot to appreciate who you are. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the conversation settling between us. Outside, a few boats were already on the lake, their occupants enjoying the perfect Sunday morning. I need to tell you something else, I said finally. I've been thinking about making some changes in my life. Not because I think I'm stuck, but because I want to grow in new directions. Dad looked up with interest. What kind of changes? I've been offered a position at the University of Texas Library System. It would mean more responsibility, better pay, and the chance to work on statewide literacy initiatives. I've been afraid to take it because I thought you needed me here. Sarah, Dad said, leaning forward, you should take it. Absolutely take it. It would mean moving to different parts of the state, maybe traveling more. I wouldn't be able to drop everything and rush over when you have a doctor's appointment. Sweetheart, Dad said, his voice gentle. I never should have let you feel responsible for taking care of me. You're not my caregiver, you're my daughter. You should be building your own life, following your own dreams. I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. I've been so afraid of disappointing you that I forgot to consider what I actually want. What do you want? Dad asked. I thought about the question seriously. I want to take the job at UT. I want to travel more. I want to date again. I've been so focused on family responsibilities that I haven't even tried to meet someone. I want to live in a bigger city, try new things, take some risks, then do it, Dad said simply. Do all of it. We talked for another hour, really talked in a way we hadn't in years. Dad apologized again for his comments at the reunion, and I apologized for not speaking up sooner about how his words affected me. We made plans for him to visit me in Austin, to see my work, to understand the life I'd built. As I packed my bag to leave, I felt different than I had when I arrived. The hurt was still there, but it was mixed with something else's sense of possibility, of change, of new beginnings. Sarah, Dad said as I loaded my car, I want you to know something. You're not the family burden. You're the family's strength. We've all leaned on you, and instead of thanking you, I made you feel small. That's my failure, not yours. I hugged him tightly, feeling like I was saying goodbye to more than just the weekend. I was saying goodbye to the version of myself that had been trying so hard to earn approval that I'd forgotten to value my own worth. I love you, Dad, I said. I love you too, sweetheart. And I'm proud of you. I should have said that more often. As I drove away from the lake house, I called the University of Texas Library System and left a message accepting their job offer. Then I called Emma and told her everything that had happened, including my decision to make some major changes in my life. I'm so proud of you, Emma said. You've been hiding your light under a bushel for so long. It's time to let it shine. The drive back to Austin felt different than the drive up had. Instead of dreading the return to my small apartment and routine life, I felt excited about the possibilities ahead. I was still the same person who loved books and quiet moments, who preferred hiking to water skiing, who valued depth over surface achievements. But now I was also someone who knew her worth, who wouldn't accept being diminished, who was ready to write her own story instead of playing a supporting role in everyone else's. The family reunion had been painful, but it had also been necessary. Sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can start climbing towards something better. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally ready to climb. The weeks following the reunion passed in a blur of activity and strange silence. I'd submitted my 2 weeks' notice at the Austin Public Library, started apartment hunting in different Texas cities, and begun the process of transitioning my programs to other librarians. The job at UT was everything I'd hoped for: better pay, more responsibility, and the chance to impact literacy programs statewide. But through it all, there was an unusual quiet from my family. I'd expected some reaction to my confrontation with Dad. Maybe a phone call from Mark or Jessica checking in, asking how things went after they left. Instead, there was nothing. No calls, no texts, no emails. Even Dad, who usually called at least once a week, had gone silent. At first I told myself they were busy. Mark had mentioned a big case he was working on, and Jessica was always consumed with her marketing campaigns. But as the silence stretched into the third week, I began to wonder if I'd damaged something irreparably with my honesty. Emma noticed my distraction during one of our regular coffee dates at a cafe near the library. "You seem off lately," she said, stirring her latte. "Are you having second thoughts about the job?" "No, the job is perfect," I said, staring out the window at the busy Austin street. "It's just... I haven't heard from my family since the reunion. Nothing." Complete radio silence. "Did you reach out to them?" I shook my head. "I keep thinking I should, but I don't know what to say." I finally stood up for myself, and now they're acting like I don't exist. Emma leaned forward. "Sarah, what exactly happened after I talked to you that day? You said you had a conversation with your dad, but you were pretty vague about the details." I told her everything: the confrontation in the kitchen, Dad's apology, the tears, the promises to do better. As I spoke, I realized how hopeful I'd been that things would actually change. "Maybe they're processing," Emma suggested. "It sounds like you called out some patterns that have been going on for years. People don't usually change overnight." "Or maybe they're angry that I disrupted the family dynamic," I said. "Maybe they liked having me as the stable, dependable one who never caused problems." "Sarah, you didn't cause problems. You named problems that already existed." That afternoon, I decided to test the waters. I sent a group text to Mark and Jessica, starting my new job next week. "Excited about this change. Hope you're both well." The response was immediate and telling. Jessica replied, "Congrats, so busy with work. Talk soon." Mark's response was even briefer. "Good luck." No questions about the job. No interest in the details. No mention of the reunion or our last conversation. It was as if nothing had happened, as if I'd never confronted years of dismissive treatment and finally found my voice. I put my phone away and focused on packing. My new position would start with a 6-month rotation in San Antonio, developing literacy programs for underserved communities. The work would be challenging and meaningful, exactly what I needed to rebuild my confidence. The silence from my family continued through my last week at the Austin Public Library. My colleagues threw me a farewell party, complete with a cake decorated with tiny books and the words, "New adventures ahead." As I looked around at these people who truly appreciated my work, who understood my passion for literacy and community service, I realized I'd been seeking validation from the wrong people for years. "You're going to be amazing," said Maria, the head librarian who'd become a mentor and friend. "UT is lucky to have you. And Sarah, don't let anyone make you feel small again. You're doing important work." Her words hit deeper than she knew. I'd told her about the family reunion, about my decision to finally speak up for myself. She'd listened without judgment, simply nodding and saying, "It's about time." On Friday evening, as I finished cleaning out my desk, my phone rang. Dad's name appeared on the screen, and I felt my heart skip. Finally. "Hi, Dad. Sarah, sweetheart, how are you?" His voice sounded normal, warm, like our confrontation had never happened. For a moment, I wondered if I'd imagined the whole thing. "I'm good. Last day at work today. Starting in San Antonio on Monday." "That's wonderful. I'm proud of you for taking this opportunity." I waited for more: an acknowledgement of our conversation, a reference to his promise to do better, something to indicate that our relationship had shifted. But there was only pleasant small talk about the weather and his doctor's appointment that week. "Dad," I said finally, "about the reunion, about our conversation." "Oh, that..." His voice became slightly strained. "I've been thinking about that. I think we both said some things we didn't mean. Sometimes family gatherings bring out the worst in everyone, you know. But that's all behind us now." The words hit me like a physical blow. All behind us now. As if my years of sacrifices, my moment of standing up for myself, My pain and his apology were just an unfortunate misunderstanding to be swept under the rug. I meant what I said, Dad, every word. There was a long pause. Sarah, you're starting a new job, a new chapter. Let's focus on moving forward, not dwelling on the past. After we hung up, I sat in my empty office and felt something crystallize inside me. This was it. This was who they were. Dad had apologized in the moment, probably felt genuine remorse, but when faced with the choice between real change and comfortable patterns, he'd chosen comfort. I thought about calling Mark or Jessica, trying to explain, trying to make them understand, but I realized I was still doing it, still trying to earn their approval, still hoping they would see my worth and validate my feelings. Instead, I finished packing my office and drove home to my apartment, where boxers labeled San Antonio waited to be loaded into my car. That weekend, I moved to San Antonio without telling my family. No group text announcing my departure, no forwarded address, no invitation to visit. For the first time in my adult life, I made a major life change without consulting them or seeking their approval. My new apartment was a charming one-bedroom in the historic King William district, with high ceilings and original hardwood floors. It was more expensive than my Austin place, but my salary increase made it affordable. More importantly, it felt like mine, chosen from my preferences, decorated to my taste, a fresh start in every sense. The work was everything I'd hoped for, and more. My first project involved partnering with local schools to create after-school literacy programs in predominantly Latino neighborhoods. The communities welcomed me warmly, and I found myself working with passionate teachers and dedicated parents who understood the value of education in ways my family never had. After 2 weeks in San Antonio, I got a call from Jessica. Sarah, Dad said you moved. Why didn't you tell us? I did tell you. I texted about starting the new job, but you didn't say you were moving. We thought it was still in Austin. I could hear genuine confusion in her voice, as if she couldn't understand why I might not share every detail of my life with them anymore. It's a 6-month rotation, I explained. Part of the job. Well, where are you living? What's your address? The question caught me off guard. Why did she need my address? To send a housewarming gift? To visit? Or just to have it on file? Another piece of information to catalog about the family member who was supposed to keep them informed of her every move. I'll send it to you, I said, though I had no intention of doing so. Are you okay, Sarah? You seem ... different. The word hung between us. I was different. I was someone who didn't automatically share every detail of her life with family members who'd never shown genuine interest. I was someone who made decisions based on her own needs rather than others' expectations. I'm great, actually, really happy with the change. After we hung up, I realized something important. I didn't miss them. Not their calls, not their approval, not their presence in my daily life. The silence that had initially worried me now felt like peace. 3 weeks into my time in San Antonio, I met David at a community event where I was presenting our new literacy program. He was a local social worker, passionate about education equity, with kind eyes and an easy laugh. When he asked me to coffee, I said yes, without the usual overthinking I'd done about dating in the past. So you're new to San Antonio, he said as we walked through the Pearl Farmers Market the following Saturday. What brought you here? I found myself telling him about the job, about my love for literacy work, about my excitement for the programs we were developing. I didn't mention my family, the reunion, or the painful process that had led to this new beginning. This was my story now, not the story of someone escaping something, but someone choosing something. You light up when you talk about your work, David observed. It's beautiful to see someone so passionate about what they do. That evening, as I cooked dinner in my new kitchen and planned the week's community outreach, I realized I felt more myself than I had in years. The person I'd been trying to be for my family, grateful, undemanding, always available, had been a performance. This version of myself, confident in her choices and excited about her future, felt authentic. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark. Dad's birthday is next month. Are you planning to come home for it? Home. The word felt strange now. Where was home? The lake house where I'd been made to feel like an outsider. Dad's house where I'd spent years managing his care while my siblings pursued their careers. Or was it here, in this apartment I'd chosen, in this city where my work mattered, among people who valued what I brought to the table? I typed and deleted several responses before finally writing, I'll see if I can get time off work. It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no. It was the response of someone who would make her decision based on her own priorities, not family obligation. The old Sarah would have immediately confirmed her attendance and started planning what gift to buy. This Sarah would think about it. As I settled into bed that night, I thought about the woman who'd driven away from the lake house 6 weeks ago, hurt and angry but determined to change her life. That woman had been brave to confront her father, brave to take the new job, brave to start over. But she'd still been thinking in terms of proving herself to others. This woman, the one falling asleep in San Antonio, was different. She wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. She was simply living her life, making choices that felt right, building relationships with people who appreciated her as she was. The silence from my family no longer felt like rejection. It felt like freedom. 2 months into my San Antonio rotation, I was thriving in ways I hadn't expected. The literacy programs were exceeding enrollment goals, the community partnerships were strong, and I'd been asked to present our model at a statewide conference in Houston. More importantly, I was happy, genuinely, consistently happy in a way I couldn't remember being before. David and I had been seeing each other regularly, taking weekend trips to small Texas towns, trying new restaurants, attending concerts at the Majestic Theater. He was everything my family had claimed I needed: stable, successful, kind, but he was interested in me for who I was, not who I might become with enough improvement. "You're different from when I first met you," he said one evening as we walked along the river walk. "More confident, more present." "How was I different before?" I asked, curious about his perception. "You seemed like you were waiting for permission to be yourself," he said thoughtfully. "Like you were constantly checking to make sure you were doing things right. Now you just ... are you? Trust your own judgment." His observation was more accurate than he knew. I had been waiting for permission from my family to be proud of my work, permission to make my own choices, permission to exist without constantly justifying my decisions. That permission had never come, so I'd finally given it to myself. Dad's birthday was approaching, and the family pressure was building. Jessica had called twice, asking about my plans. Mark had sent a group text about gift ideas. Even distant cousins were reaching out, asking if I'd be at the celebration. "It's just dinner at Dad's house," Jessica explained during our latest call. "Nothing fancy, but he's turning 65, Sarah. It's a milestone birthday." "I understand that," I said, sorting through applications for our new adult literacy program while we talked. "I'm just not sure I can get away from work." "You just started there. Surely they'd understand family obligations." Family obligations, the phrase that had governed so much of my life, that had kept me tethered to a family dynamic that diminished me at every turn. "My work here is important, Jess. I have commitments to the community, more important than Dad's birthday." The question hung in the air between us. The old Sarah would have immediately backtracked, apologized, found a way to make both work and family happy. But this Sarah paused, considering the question seriously. "Different kind of important," I said finally. That weekend, I drove to Austin to collect some belongings I'd left in storage. The city felt strange now, like a place I'd visited rather than lived in for years. My old apartment building looked smaller, my former neighborhood less vibrant than I remembered. On impulse, I drove past the public library where I'd worked. Through the windows, I could see the children's reading circle in session, story time happening without me. The sight made me smile rather than feel nostalgic. Good work was continuing, as it always did. I was loading boxes into my car when my phone rang. Dad's name on the screen. "Sarah, I was hoping we could talk." "Sure, Dad. What's up?" "Jessica mentioned you might not make it to my birthday dinner. I wanted to check in with you personally." His voice carried that careful tone I'd come to recognize, the one he used when he was trying to manage family dynamics, trying to keep everyone happy. "Work is really busy right now," I said, which was true. "The programs are taking off faster than we expected." "I'm glad to hear that. I really am. But Sarah, we haven't seen you since the reunion. The family misses you. The family misses you." Not "I miss you." Not "I'd love to see you." The collective voice of family obligation. "I've been building a new life here, Dad. It's been good for me. I know, and I'm proud of you for that. But sometimes I worry that you're isolating yourself, running away from family because of one difficult conversation. Running away. The phrase stung because it carried just enough truth to hurt. I had run away, in a sense, but I'd run toward something, not just away from something. "Dad, do you remember what we talked about at the lake house? About how I'd been feeling?" "Of course I remember." And I apologized for my comments. I thought we'd moved past that. We moved past the specific comments, I said carefully. But the underlying issues, the way the family treats me, the way my contributions are valued, those things haven't changed. Sarah, you're being dramatic. One bad evening doesn't erase decades of family love. Dramatic. Another word designed to diminish, to make my feelings seem unreasonable, excessive, wrong. It wasn't one bad evening, Dad. It was years of feeling like I didn't matter, like my choices were wrong, like I was the family disappointment. The reunion was just when I finally said something about it. But we're family, Dad said, his voice rising slightly. Family forgives, family moves on, family shows up for each other, family also respects each other, I replied. Family values each other's contributions, family doesn't humiliate each other in public. The silence stretched between us. Finally, Dad sighed. What do you want from us, Sarah? What would it take for you to come home? Home. There was that word again. The word that assumed my life in San Antonio was temporary, that my real life was still centered on their needs and expectations. I am home, Dad. This is my life now. My work, my apartment, my relationships, they're here. For 6 months, he said. Then what? You'll just keep running to new places whenever things get difficult. The accusation hit its mark, mainly because I'd wondered the same thing myself. Was I building a new life, or just avoiding an old one? I don't know what happens after 6 months, I said honestly. But I know I'm happier here than I've been in years. I know I'm doing work that matters. I know I'm in a relationship with someone who values me as I am. Relationship, Dad's voice sharpened with interest. You're seeing someone. I almost laughed at how quickly his attention shifted. Sarah's unhappy. That's her problem. Sarah's dating someone. Now we need details. Yes, I'm seeing someone. His name is David. He's a social worker. That's wonderful. When do we get to meet him? The assumption in the question was breathtaking. Of course, I would bring David home to meet the family. Of course, I would subject him to their judgment, their questions, their evaluation of whether he was good enough for the family disappointment. We'll see, I said. Sarah, I don't understand what's happening with you. You used to be so close to the family. You used to want to be involved in everything. I used to try very hard to earn your approval, I corrected. There's a difference. After we hung up, I sat in my car in the parking lot of my old apartment building and felt the weight of the conversation. Part of me wanted to give in, to show up at Dad's birthday dinner, to slip back into the familiar role of the accommodating daughter who put family peace above her own well-being. But I thought about the life I'd been building in San Antonio, the literacy programs that were changing lives, the community partnerships that were growing stronger each week, the relationship with David that felt equal and supportive, the version of myself that had emerged when I stopped trying to be what others wanted. I started my car and drove back to San Antonio, back to my real life. That evening, I called David and told him about the conversation with Dad. Sounds like they want you to come back on their terms, he observed. No acknowledgement of what led you to leave, no recognition of the changes you've made. It's hard, I admitted. Part of me misses them. Part of me wants to just forget everything and go back to the way things were. What would that look like? David asked. Going back to the way things were. I thought about it seriously. It would mean giving up this job, this life I'm building. It would mean going back to Austin, back to being available whenever they needed something, back to accepting their definition of success instead of my own. And how does that sound to you? Terrible, I said, surprised by how quickly and definitively the word came out. It sounds like giving up who I've become. Then you have your answer. The next day, I sent Dad a text. I won't be able to make it to your birthday dinner. Work commitments here. Hope you have a wonderful celebration. His response came an hour later. I'm disappointed, but I understand. Love you. It was a perfectly reasonable response. Kind, even, but it carried an undertone of martyrdom that I recognized from years of family interactions. I'm disappointed, but I understand translated to, I'm hurt, but I'm being the bigger person about your selfishness. I showed the text to my colleague Rosa during lunch. She was a local San Antonio native who'd become a friend and mentor, someone whose judgment I'd come to trust. Guilt trip, she said immediately. My family does the same thing. I'm hurt, but I understand is code for, you should feel bad about your choices. Maybe I should feel bad, I said. It's his 65th birthday. Sarah, honey. Rosa set down her sandwich and looked at me directly. You've been here 2 months. In that time, you've launched 3 new programs, increased community engagement by 40%, and brought in additional funding from 2 grants. You wrote, "You've been a gift to this community. If your family can't see that, can't be proud of that, can't celebrate that, that's their loss." Her words hit me like a revelation. I had been a gift to this community. The work I was doing mattered, made a difference, changed lives. Why was I questioning the value of that? Because my family couldn't see it. That weekend, instead of driving to Austin for Dad's birthday, I attended the quinceañera of one of my literacy program participants. Maria Elena had struggled with reading when she first joined our program 6 months ago. Now she was reading at grade level and had been accepted to community college. "Miss Sarah," she said, hugging me after the ceremony, "thank you for believing in me. My parents say I'm the first in our family who will go to college." As I watched her dance with her father, surrounded by a community that celebrated her achievements, I thought about different definitions of family. This community had welcomed me, valued my contributions, celebrated my successes. They had become family in ways that biology and shared history couldn't create. My phone buzzed with photos from Dad's birthday dinner. Everyone gathered around the table, smiling, laughing, raising glasses in a toast. They looked happy, complete, like they hadn't noticed my absence at all. And for the first time, that realization didn't hurt. It felt like freedom. 6 months later, I stood in the conference room of the University of Texas Library System headquarters in Austin, presenting the results of our San Antonio Literacy Initiative to a room full of university administrators, community leaders, and education officials. The PowerPoint slides behind me showed impressive statistics. Literacy rates up 35% in participating schools. Adult program enrollment tripled, to additional communities requesting program expansion. The key to our success, I explained to the room, has been community partnership. We didn't impose a program on these neighborhoods, we listened to what they needed and built something together. After the presentation, Dr. Patricia Morales, the director of the UT Library System, approached me with a smile. "Sarah, that was outstanding. I have a proposition for you." She offered me a permanent position as director of statewide literacy initiatives, based in Austin but with travel throughout Texas. It was everything I dreamed of professionally, significant responsibility, excellent salary, the chance to replicate our San Antonio success across the state. "There's just one thing," Dr. Morales added. "We'd need you to start immediately, and we'd like you to consider speaking at the National Literacy Conference in Denver next month about your community partnership model." I accepted on the spot. That evening, as I packed my belongings in my San Antonio apartment, I felt a bittersweet mix of excitement and nostalgia. This city had been my chrysalis, the place where I'd transformed from someone seeking others' approval into someone confident in her own worth. David helped me load boxes into the moving truck, his presence steady and supportive, as always. We'd discussed what my move back to Austin would mean for our relationship, and he'd surprised me by saying he'd been considering a job change himself. "There's a position with the Austin Independent School District," he'd told me, "Director of Social Services." I wasn't sure I was ready for the responsibility, but watching you take on new challenges has inspired me. "You'd move to Austin for me?" I'd asked, touched by the gesture. "I'd move to Austin for us," he'd corrected, "but also for myself. Sometimes you need to see someone else take a leap to realize you're ready to jump to Plana." As we secured the last of the boxes, I marveled at how different this felt from my move to San Antonio 8 months ago. Then, I'd been running away from pain, seeking escape. Now, I was running toward opportunity, carrying confidence and clarity about who I was and what I wanted. "Ready?" David asked, closing the truck's rear door. "Ready," I said, and meant it. The drive back to Austin felt like a victory lap. I'd left the city as someone defeated and diminished. I was returning as someone who'd proven herself, who'd built something meaningful, who'd found love and partnership and professional success. My new apartment was in a historic neighborhood near downtown, with exposed brick walls and large windows that filled the space with light. It was twice the size of my old Austin apartment and cost less than what I'd been paying in San Antonio, thanks to my salary increase. As I unpacked my belongings, I found the program from Dad's 65th birthday dinner. Jessica had mailed it to me with a note. "Thought you might want this as a keepsake." The program was elegant, professional looking, with a photo of Dad smiling and a list of toasts given by various family members. I wasn't listed among the speakers. Looking at it now, I felt a complex mix of emotions: sadness that I'd missed celebrating my father's milestone birthday, relief that I hadn't subjected myself to another evening of feeling diminished, and most surprising of all, a kind of peace about the choice I'd made. 3 days after my return to Austin, Dad called. "Jessica told me you're back in town," he said. "I'd love to see you, hear about your new job." "I'd like that too," I said, and realized I meant it. We met for lunch at a cafe near the university campus. Dad looked older than I remembered, his hair grayer, his face more lined, but his smile was genuine when he saw me. "You look wonderful," he said, embracing me. "Happy, successful." "I am happy," I said simply. Over lunch, I told him about the literacy programs, the communities I'd worked with, the conference presentation, my new position. He listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions, showing genuine interest in the details. "I'm proud of you," he said finally, "really proud. What you're doing, it matters." The words I'd waited years to hear, but hearing them now, I realized something surprising. I no longer needed them. His pride was nice to have, but my sense of my own worth no longer depended on it. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot. Sarah, I owe you an apology. A real one, not the half-hearted one I gave you at the lake house." I waited, curious about what he would say. "I've been thinking a lot about our conversation that day, about the things you said. You were right about everything. I did dismiss your work, your choices, your contributions to the family. I did make you feel small when I should have been celebrating you." He paused, staring down at his coffee. "I think I was threatened by your independence, by your willingness to live life on your own terms. Mark and Jessica, ... They chose paths I understood, paths that looked like success to me. But you chose something different, something I couldn't measure or evaluate. Instead of trying to understand it, I diminished it." His honesty surprised me. "What changed? What made you see it differently?" "Honestly, you leaving." He looked up at me. "When you didn't come to my birthday, when you stopped calling regularly, when you just withdrew from the family, I realized what we'd lost. I realized that I'd been so focused on what I thought you should be, that I'd never appreciated who you are." I felt tears threatening but managed to keep my voice steady. "I didn't leave to punish anyone, Dad. I left because I needed to find out who I was when I wasn't trying to earn anyone's approval." "And who are you?" he asked. I thought about the question seriously. "I'm someone who loves literacy work, who builds meaningful community partnerships, who values depth over surface achievements. I'm someone who would rather have a few close relationships than many superficial ones. I'm someone who's learned to trust her own judgment." Dad smiled. "Your mother would be so proud of who you've become." "She always was proud of me," I said gently. "Even when you weren't sure what to make of my choices." "You're right," he acknowledged. "She saw your strength long before I did." We talked for 2 hours, really talked in a way we hadn't since I was a child. He told me about his loneliness since Mom's death, his struggle to maintain connections with Mark and Jessica, now that they had their own busy lives. I told him about David, about my work, about the life I was building. "I'd like to meet David," Dad said as we prepared to leave. "I'd like that too," I said. "But Dad, ... things are different now. I'm different. I won't go back to being the family member who's always available, always accommodating, always seeking approval." "I wouldn't want you to," he said. "I like this version of you better. You're stronger, more confident. You know your own mind." As we hugged goodbye, I felt something shift between us, not back to the old dynamic, but forward to something new. A relationship between two adults who respected each other, rather than a parent and child stuck in outdated patterns. That weekend, David arrived in Austin with his own moving truck. We spent Saturday setting up his apartment across town, Sunday exploring our new city together. On Sunday evening, we cooked dinner in my kitchen and talked about our plans. "How do you feel about being back?" he asked. "Good," I said, surprising myself with the simplicity of the answer. "I left Austin as someone running away. I'm back as someone who knows where she's going." 3 weeks later, I hosted my first dinner party in the new apartment. The guests were an eclectic mix: David, Rosa Hood driven up from San Antonio, 2 colleagues from my new job, my friend Emma, and Dad. I watched Dad interact with my friends, asking Rosa about her work in San Antonio, discussing education policy with my UT colleagues, talking sports with David. He was engaged, interested, genuinely curious about the people who mattered to me. After dinner, as we sat on my small balcony with glasses of wine, Dad pulled me aside. "These are good people," he said. "I can see why you're happy here." "They are good people," I agreed. "They value the same things I valued." I want to be someone who values what you value, Dad said. I want to be part of this life you're building, not someone trying to pull you back to an old life that didn't fit. 6 months later, I stood at the podium of the Denver Convention Center, addressing 1,000 literacy professionals from across the country. My presentation was titled Community Partnership in Literacy, Building Programs from the Ground Up. In the audience, I spotted familiar faces: Dr. Morales, Rosa, several colleagues from the UT system. In the back row, I was surprised and touched to see Dad, who'd flown to Denver to hear me speak. The most important lesson I've learned, I told the audience, is that effective literacy programs aren't imposed from the outside. They're grown from within communities, nurtured by people who understand local needs, supported by institutions willing to listen rather than dictate. After the presentation, as people crowded around with questions and business cards, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was my expertise, my contribution, my professional identity. I was no longer someone seeking approval for my choices. I was someone whose expertise was sought by others. That evening, Dad took David and me to dinner at a restaurant overlooking the Rocky Mountains. "I'm proud of you," he said, raising his glass. "Not just for the presentation, not just for your success, but for having the courage to leave a situation that wasn't working and build something better." "To new beginnings," David added, raising his own glass. "To new beginnings," I echoed, thinking about how far I'd traveled from that painful night at the Lake House reunion. As we clinked glasses, I thought about the woman who'd left that reunion in tears, feeling diminished and defeated. She couldn't have imagined this moment: professional recognition, loving relationship, family respect earned rather than demanded. The journey from that reunion to this dinner had taught me something invaluable. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for yourself and others is to stop accepting treatment that diminishes you. Sometimes you have to be willing to lose relationships to save them. Sometimes you have to leave home to find your way back. I was no longer the family burden. I was no longer seeking permission to be myself. I was Sarah Henderson, literacy advocate, community partner, daughter, girlfriend, professional, and I was exactly who I was supposed to be. The silence that had once felt like rejection now felt like the quiet confidence of someone who knows her worth. And in that silence, I had finally learned to hear my own voice.
Sometimes the hardest thing we can do is walk away from people who claim to love us, but consistently make us feel small. Sarah's story reminds us that our worth isn't determined by others' approval, not even from family. If you've ever felt like the family burden, the one who gives more than they receive, the person whose achievements are dismissed or minimized, know that you're not alone. Your contributions matter, your choices are valid, your happiness is important. Sarah had to leave to find her voice, but sometimes that's what it takes. Sometimes loving yourself means setting boundaries that others might not understand. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to accept less than you deserve. Have you ever had to choose between family peace and your own self-respect? Have you walked away from situations or relationships that were slowly diminishing who you are? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if Sarah's journey resonated with you, if you felt that familiar ache of being undervalued by the people who should celebrate you most, please share this story. Someone in your life might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your worth, to build the life you deserve, and to find people who see your value without needing to be convinced. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of courage, transformation, and the strength it takes to choose yourself. Because your story matters, your voice deserves to be heard, and you are worth so much more than you've been led to believe. What would you have done in Sarah's situation? Tell us in the comments. We read every single one.